Hey guys, BJTHEBRAVE here, back with an update on the meta snapshot for Warhammer 40k Warpforge. Alright, so if anybody's new here, the way we do this, we're going to look at 3 tiers. Now, all the decks that you see in this snapshot, they're all good decks. They're all decks that are very playable on ladder, and they're the decks that you're going to mainly see. So the kind of hidden tier 4, if you like, is kind of like everything else. Like, they're not very good or not very relevant. It doesn't mean that if the Warlord's not showing here that someone can't make a good deck and do pretty well, but it just means that what we're going to see here is the kind of likely candidates. Obviously, tier 1 being the best decks, tier 2 and tier 3 kind of follow suit, slightly less win rates, but can be good prey decks and beat tier 1 decks as well. So it doesn't just mean that like tier 1 decks are undefeatable kind of thing, right? So just to clarify that, and yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to jump in, we're going to look at the tiers, and then I'm going to show you a few example deck lists as well. Alrighty then, so let's get into it, shall we? And of course, if you like this sort of thing, hit that thumbs up down below. Really appreciate all the support as always. Right, let's jump in. So first of all, let's talk about tier 3. Now, tier 3, these are good decks. They're putting up decent. They can put up definitely get to legendary. They can put up decent win rates. I've actually chosen ultramarines as one of my 4 this season, and I'm already over 3,100 MMR. And I think, whilst I think Chaplain Lotharius is also pretty good and very, very close to being in here, I actually say that the 2 decks for me that I would put forward are Titus, who I finally got, literally not that long ago, and Uriel Ventress Burn. So 2 different types of decks. Titus is very much a tank and is very, very survivable. So what we've got there is a mid-range deck. We're going to use Silverblade's deck. Guys, if you don't follow Silverblade, by the way, he's one of the best Marine players. Go on to YouTube and definitely give him a sub. He'd really appreciate that. He's starting to put content out, and his recent Titus deck is very, very good. I'll show you that list in a minute, but I'd encourage you to go and sub to his channel. We're probably going to do a collaboration very soon on Space Marines on Masterclass. If you like that, the idea of that, then let me know in the comments. Anyway, so the alternative way of playing the Marines, I think, is still the Uriel Burn. I still think the Uriel Burn can just catch many, many decks out, and is just very, very... It's a very unique in the game of Warpforge in that it's a proper aggro deck. Like, it puts out a board early on, then it loses the board, but then it wins with burn. So I really like that style, and I think it's really powerful. Magnus Nass has fallen from grace somewhat. You know, he's not being played anywhere near as much. This guy's been tier 1 for quite a few seasons now, and obviously the nerf to his Warlord trait really did harm him. But that said, it's almost like a case of you almost have forgot, right? If you look at the kind of tier 1 Shrigma deck that was dominating, it's still a good deck. It's not tier 1 anymore. The nerf to the Warlord power and the shifts in the meta and stuff have ensured that, but it's still very good. Make no mistake about it. You run that deck, you can easily hit legendary, and I would suggest get a pretty good score beyond that as well. So I still think, you know, to say that Nass is sort of below that in sort of tier 4 onwards, I think is too much of a stretch. It's still a decent deck. And if you're a GSC player, I don't think you have to feel too bad about that. Next up, we got Galaron the Pious. I mean, Galaron has had so many changes to just to his abilities. I think they've really struggled to find his identity, but they seem to be there now. I think giving vulnerable 2 to a unit is incredibly strong. It's a really great way of kind of like just feeling confident you can control the board, right? So I think it's working quite well. The opportunity to heal every time, and also bringing a card that had a lot of promise on release, which was the Adulterous Despoilers, the 4-drop that basically means every enemy unit that gets dropped for the rest of the game has a vulnerable, has now really become a Galaron card. Like, that card is so good because they drop it, it's vulnerable, and then that means Galaron's ability, which says that every time a vulnerable unit dies, gain 1 health, basically means every single unit now that your opponent plays is going to heal Galaron when it dies. So Galaron's finally kind of started to find the mark. The interesting thing is, you know, it's one of the main problems I have with Chaos as a faction, that it's still, the best deck is still very similar to that Abaddon deck. It's just a slightly different way. It's like we're trying to get to the same destination. We're just going to go down two different motorways. You know, it's very very similar in the deck composition, because I feel like Chaos really need a deeper deck card pool and some alternative ideas. But yeah, that deck's pretty strong now. And if you're a big fan of Galaron, he's now very much playable. For sure. Ursula Creed, I would say, is probably slightly the best. Well, I don't know. I keep going back and forth between Ursula and Denkler. I think they're both actually pretty similar. It could be one of these where it's like a split thing. I think they're about the same in terms of win rates. But I think Ursula might be just have a few more things. Like, for example, her talent alone means that from a tempo perspective, she can just get out of the blocks quicker. And also the deck I'm going to show you today, which Slither, our squad member, made a couple of seasons ago, is actually just a really solid mid-range unit. Deck. Now Imhotech's very good as well, because Imhotech is it's had a few stealth creeps like buffs and stuff over the last few seasons, and also with the advent of more marines and the sort of lower curve tempo decks are a thing that Swarmlord does pretty good against, except for really Tyranids. So he can kind of like, yeah, he can just sort of like bully those decks a little bit. And actually, we saw in the official EG meta report that the win rate had gone up somewhat there. So let's just show you. Let's just show you a couple of example decks then. All right, so we'll start out with the Uriel Burn. You've kind of seen this. I've got a deck guide on this. I'm not going to go into it. If you want to see more about Uriel Burn, go and watch my deck guide. Now, I think the one that Silverblade published is this one. I kind of dropped one chapter's due for an Aggressor Sergeant. I'm just testing that. But you could certainly, he runs double chapters due. And I kind of thought it was a strange choice, but then when I think about it, like, the other one drops actually just don't make that much sense in this deck, and I do think you need to have a couple of one drops with Marines because it's so important. You can always hit Codex and fill your curve out, and if you don't have one drops, then it's hard to do that. So you know, like I said, I'm just testing this. Drop the Sergeant if you like and put the second chapter's due in. This deck's actually pretty good. It's Silverblade's done a good deck guide, so go and check out his YouTube channel. Give him a subscribe and watch his video on it. But essentially, you hit a lot with Titus's ability, healing up, and you've got some great combinations with his ability, like the Devastator Doctrine, which is just phenomenal because you can end up getting 5 blast. And you've got some kind of pretty decent mid-range units, and then some burn built into it, right? With the Death from Buzz, the Storm Ravens, the Calcius, etc. So yeah, I think this deck is proving to be pretty good, actually. To be honest, pretty strong. And at 3,100 MMR, this is currently the deck I'm playing around with as well. Okay, so what else did we have in Tier 3? Well, we had Nas, Galaron, wasn't it? Now the Galaron deck is one that I would suggest go and see the Ecclesiarch's channel. He did a full deck guide with gameplay on the Galaron deck, and I still think that something like that's probably the best one, so I'm not going to go into it too much there. Then we had the Ursula deck, and I'm going to show you the Vox Shenanigans deck that Slither came up with. So this is just pretty good because it's got like the strong early game, and it's got the kind of combinations with the Vox Operator. So you can basically do all sorts with this, right? You can play it with a Bombust Field Gun to give you some AoE, doing 3 to 5 damage on an enemy instantly, coming on and flanking. You can use it on the Chimera to instantly trigger its ability to drop the shock troops. That can kind of give you a really good board. You can use it even on things like the Vanquisher, where this thing comes on and then just instantly does its duty, which means it can deal 8 damage, which is essentially a Wailing Doom because it can go to face as well. So I think overall, like, this deck gives you really strong flexibility, right? Like, it's got things like the Warhead. It's got a solid curve. I think this deck is really good, and I know that Longtim used it to climb to 3k quite easily this season as well. So yeah, definitely recommend this. this deck. Okay, now, what else did we have in the tier 3? Oh, we had Imatech, didn't we? So, the other, I'll show you something like this, which is, and you know, it's nothing too fancy. It's a pretty kind of standard Imatech control deck where we are, you know, playing for the Tomb World as the finisher. Got a couple of new cards in like the Locust Lord. We've got the one Implacable Conqueror. I mean, you can go two, but you really only need one. And also the units, it's got really tight as to like, there's so many cards now that you want to play in this type of deck that I guess you just need to be a little bit strict. So that's why we've only got like one damage hex mark for a sort of finisher play, or one, you know, one Conqueror, one Lich Guard. It is still nice to have. I know a lot of people are getting down on Lich Guard, but guys, he's still a really good blocker, and it's also quite a difference when you play Tomb World and you have a Lich Guard coming out of that than when you don't have a Vanguard. So I think still one of them is good. I can't remember where I got this from, but it was one of the top players, Necron players, and so yeah, definitely you can run this with some success. Alrighty, let's take a look at tier 2. Alright, so in tier 2, so the first thing I want to say here is that just Eldar in general, the Aeldari, the card pool is very strong, as in not the depth of it, but the top 30 cards, top 35 cards in the faction are very strong, very strong. Like they're not, the faction is as close to being broken without being broken. I think it's just like very, you know, A star, like very A tier, you know, like it's as strong as it can be. And that's why you see that every single one of the Eldar Warlords was in the top 10 when you looked at the legendary win rates. So you can't really go wrong. All of the Warlords are good, guys. Like Galen does tempo well, Zephyblade does tempo with stealth and hit and run, and he's got the big health body as well. Anvia does really well with the Reclaim the Stars shenanigans, right? With that combo, cheating mana, and his Warlord ability only costing 1 has just made it so much more useful. So basically all the Eldar Warlords are very, very good. I would say at the bottom of the tier I've gone with Zephyblade and Galen. I think they're kind of pretty much a coin toss. I think there are, at the very top of Legendary, I think there are probably more players currently playing Zephyblade than Galen, but they are very, very close in power and very strong. Now Primaris Saphiriana is interesting because to fill the void that Nas kind of left at the top of the meta, my teammate in the Alliance, Tagios, posted the highest score this season with GSC, and he's used Saphiriana, and that deck is doing fantastic. And it's I think you'll be quite interested to see that deck because it's actually pretty much a sabotage, like more late game version. So it's kind of interesting that he's done so well to get such a high score. Now in terms of the Tau, obviously we got a balance patch this season, and the Tau were the ones that were impacted the most. So the great news is Tau are back. I can safely say I've played all 4 Warlords this season. I need to play a bit more Shadow Sun. I've played a few games with him, but I've played with her, but I've played with all the others as well, and I really had good win rates with Onvar, decent win rates with Warshaper. I think Warshaper is really good. It's just I didn't like the kind of lack of range damage, but you know, if you look at like Lord Edge, who's been the top Tau player for 3-4 seasons, it's all he plays is Warshaper, and he's doing very well, and he's currently, well, between me and him, we keep kind of overtaking each other as of recording this, or the top slot on the Tau leaderboard. So he's using Warshaper. The one I've used the majority of though is Mesos. Like I said, I've used all of the Warlords this season, but Mesos for me has been my favourite, and I think the highest win rate as well. So great to see that Tau are now playable again and competitive. Next up we've got trusty old Abaddon the Despoiler. He hasn't gone anywhere, guys. He is still very strong. I think he just edges Galaron, which is why I've got him in the tier 2 and Galaron in tier 3. It's close, guys. Like, there's not lots between them anymore, like maybe 3% on rate, but he's still old reliable. It's the 40 health, it's the guaranteed the guaranteed I've forgotten what we call them now. What do we call them? gifts from... You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. I think the only thing to say about Abaddon, and it's why he's not tier 1 at the minute, is there is a bit of a stun meta thing going on, and if you're relying on Abaddon to do the big combo finishes, as has been the case the last few seasons, dark packs, that's what I was thinking of. Guaranteed dark packs. But if you are relying on him to do the big kind of combo finish, it's not going to work as well, because you're going to find Abaddon getting stunned, which is why what a lot of crafty Abaddon players are doing is moving over the combo to actual troops, and therefore they're running things like Skeins of Fate and Demonic Frenzy and getting the units to do the double attack rather than Abaddon himself. Alright, next up we got Anvia. I do think Anvia is bordering tier 1. Like, Anvia is really strong. Again, another one that since his buff, was it last season? Or the season before? I think it was 2 seasons ago. Where basically his Warlord power went down to only 1 instead of 2. That made such a difference, guys. It's the Swiss Army knife. It's such a fun deck. Like, you can put some one-offs in the deck, right? Like, you can play something like Evasive Maneuver if you want to heal and avoid like enemy Eldars burning you down, or Erika's stunning you every turn. You can play something like an Evasive Maneuver. You can just tech these cards in, and because there's only one of, you can just get rid of them with Anvia's ability. So, super Swiss Army knife. But in terms of the 30 cards, very powerful. Obviously, you go off for Reclaim the Stars. That's the big cheat in this deck, and that is still incredibly swingy. It's one of the most potent tempo swings in the game. And honestly, I was really struggling. Like, do I keep him top of tier 2, bottom of tier 1, right on the border? I've decided to just say I think top of tier 2. So, let's take a look at a couple of decks, shall we? Now, if anybody's got a Zephyr Blade top tier legend deck, please send it me, because I know it exists. I haven't got the exact deck list, so sadly I can't share that with you. Now, the Primaris, we talked about Rihanna. This is the Rihanna deck, what I think is currently one of the best versions. Like I say, it's currently the highest ranked GSC deck in the game at the time of recording. You know, there might be, people might have opinions about certain cards. I'm still not sure about this card, Canvas. But, as I said, highest scoring deck, so who am I to argue? Deck looks pretty good. I've played it a little bit this season, and I hadn't mastered it by any means, but I could certainly see its power. It's slower than the old NAS deck, but it has much disruption. If you like disruption decks, this is the deck for you, sure. And some really nice late game, big removal from Benefactors, obviously Telepathic, one of my favourite cards in the whole game, and even the Big Day of Ascension as well, because you are going to end up with lots of cards in their hand. And one of the things that's pretty cool about this iteration is the introduction of the Underground Network, which basically makes the Sabotagers cost more, making it harder for your opponent to just get rid of them. It stops them basically developing a board as they try to get rid of the Sabotagers from their hand. Really strong deck. Okay, also, what else can we show in tier 2? Okay, so obviously we have my priority target deck. I think this deck is fantastic. I think you can, the one thing that I think is still a little bit of flexibility on is the second priority target. If you want to get greedy, because like you've got the Dark Strider, which gives you a priority target, you've got one here, and then obviously you've got missile drones that can add Markolites through the game, and you've also got Storm of Will from Leviathan, Storm of Will. I don't know what names are tonight, guys, but you know, Onshi and Death Theory give you that as well. So you've got so many win cons. I talk about this in the deck guide. Again, I'm not going to repeat the deck guide. Go and watch the deck guide, guys, on my YouTube channel. But this deck is very powerful. I think on the deck guide I actually had the 7 drop. I was just testing the battle suit, just one copy of the Cold Star, and I said in the guide that I'd probably swap it for a Rampager, and I think that's true. I think the Rampager is better. Now, what you could do is you could run double Rampager and only one Savior, no, not Savior, only one priority target. If you feel more comfortable having that, then do it. But personally, I prefer the second priority target because I look at it this way: like if there is something big on board in an emergency, I can use the priority target, and I'll have generally you have a white board, so I can clear anywhere. You could argue that you then train your board in though, so I can understand if people want a second rampager, but I found, like, you know, we've got the enforcers, which put some power on, we've got long strike, and we've got marker light, so I've just found that this has worked really nicely for me. If I was coming up against more Imperial Guard, probably would make that swap and put in the second rampager, but literally guys, I think this deck is pretty refined now. I am smashing it with this deck. I'm like top of the tower leaderboard. Well, me and Lord Edge keep like taking each other at the top. With this deck is very powerful, I've got no doubt about it. So yeah, give it a shot. We've covered Anvia before, but this is kind of like a really good Anvia deck, and I think it's really powerful. We do in a single Cosmic Serpent as well, just to really push the kind of power ceiling, if you like. You know, getting it off with things like a Warlock or targeting Spirit Seer can just be game winning. And we even teched in one evasive maneuver as well, just again using Anvia's power. So it's really about understanding the matchups. This particular version is like really flexible, basically. Can deal with anything in the meta pretty much. We just have to, you know, mulligan correctly and use Anvia's power correctly. Very, very strong deck though. Alrighty, let's get back to our tier list. So, tier 1 guys. Alright, so starting from the bottom, working our way up, I've got Warboss Gordrang in there. I think Gordrang is a powerhouse now, right? Like the Orkz have always been strong, and I think it's fair to say that the benefit of Gordrang having the 4 damage, combining that with all of the combos we know that Orkz have, but in addition, the recent balance patch giving him heal for every single opposing unit. I mean, it's just so powerful. It's got to be one of the most powerful warlocks in the game. And Gordrang just has, you know, just has it all, don't they? You know, they've got the big kind of beat down finishers, making it feel like it's tailored for an aggro deck. But then they've got these control tools, the Will of Gorks, the Scorcher Assaults, the really good strong 6E flankers. It's a very, very good deck. If you are a big fan of the Orkz, then this is the deck you want towards. Guiding Swarmlord hasn't gone anywhere. They nerfed a few units, you know, they took a couple of points here and there off some stealth units. It doesn't matter. The Swarmlord deck is still, to be honest, heads and shoulders above the rest of the Tyranids. He's carrying the Tyranids right now. Which means the faction's in an interesting place, because how do you balance the other warlords without tipping Swarmlord over the edge? I did kind of wonder whether they'd design cards at some point that said, you know, can't be used by in one of the warlords. That's one way they could do it, but you'd need a much deeper card pool than we currently got, to be honest. Anyway, guys, Swarmlord is a classic kind of board building deck. You can run it slightly slower and more mid-rangey for units, or you can go faster and play things like stealth units and augmented ferocity to just try and end the game quicker. Probably that version is the slightly more meta one. That's the one I'll kind of show you. And then we got Jane Czar. Now Jane Czar did come onto the scene only last season, kind of gone through a bit of a whirlwind already. It started out not great, then they buffed it, too good, and so it was smashing the meta. Then they kind of nerfed it slightly, so instead of doing 2 damage every time you stun, it now only does 1. I think the balance is about right. Jane Czar is the main Eldar deck I've been playing as one of my 4. As I said, I've been playing Ultramarines, Jane Czar, the Eldar, I've been playing Sisters, and I've been playing Tau, Isos. And Jane Czar's a very, I think, very good, I think, quite tactical deck. It's quite it's would I call it aggro? No, not really. It's quite a unique style in a way with Jane Czar, because you're constantly wanting to lock the board down with stun, and you're playing lots of stealth units, and then you've got flankers, so your opponent can't really interact. It's a very uninteractive deck for your opponent, which makes it one of the more frustrating decks to play against. But yeah, if you like that kind of style, if you're an MTG Magic player with a, think of blue energy there, I think of Jane Zardex or Pulsar and Zarn from like Legends of Runeterra, that type of thing. So yeah, I mean, definitely give it a try. It's brought something new to the Eldar, and it's pretty, like I said, it's not pretty, it's very strong right now, very strong. And again, another one I've put a 3.1k score on already, and we're a quarter of the way into the season. Alright, so let's get on to the big one, shall we? Now, you'll notice that Erica has a big S on the top of her card here, and that's because I genuinely think that that Erica is just like, I know it's tier 1 and I know I've got her to the left, but I think she's just a slight notch above the last three we've just said, and that's why I've given her S tier. A lot of what I'll say for Erica will be the same for Junith, so I'll save some of it, but the one thing I will say is that her hero power, being able to stun and do 3 damage, is incredibly powerful if or when you get your 6 faith. Obviously, until you get that, she's got a pretty underpowered warlord power, whereas Junith's is kind of like, not, I wouldn't say it's underpowered, it's a bit meh, but it's not as underpowered. With Erica's is like 2 energy to thinking 1 is not good, but once she gets that thing online, oh my god, I mean, it's difficult for her to lose. It's really difficult for Erica to lose once she's got 6 up. Incredibly powerful. Junith is, as you'll see, I've got S+ tier. I think Junith is in that kind of very special place that we reserve for only a handful of decks since the game's been live, since I've started playing in early access, where essentially the deck is broken. I'm gonna say it, guys, like, Junith is busted. Now, it doesn't mean she can't lose. There are weaknesses, albeit quite short, small ones. The biggest weakness for Junith is even if Junith mulligans correctly and gets the wrong cards, the wrong half of a deck, and playing against, like, say, Uriel Burn, and they get the perfect curve, like, that's where Junith loses. Most of the games I've lost with Junith this season, funnily enough, have been to Ultramarines, and that's exactly what's happened. Now, if I do get the right cards and they don't get perfect curve, then Junith suddenly can win that matchup comfortably. So there's a very small window of opportunity, but honestly, guys, the deck is, as I said, it's broken. There's so many cards in the Sisters right now that are absolutely busted cards. Like, in a vacuum, they are broken. And I think the reason for it is that the faction is designed in a way where it's meant to be deliberately weak early game and then overly strong late game. It's kind of like how it's meant to be designed. Problem is that, and their core faction mechanics just generally don't work very well. Like, Prey just doesn't work. It's why we rely on Relic of St. Catherine. It's the only way to get your Prey reliably up. And so, to compensate, they've got these broken cards. If you put these cards in any other faction, like if you put them in Orkz, oh my god, like, you just have a 100% win rate. So I think Junith has reached the point where she is broken. She is desperately in need of nerf. My Alliance teammate, Shrigma Mail, posted a 4,000 MMR score within like 5 days of the season. There's still 25 days to go, and he's got a 4K score. That's never happened. That's never happened. He has done 4K before, but not after 5 days in the season. The deck is busted. It's S+ tier. So let's take a look at some of these decks. Yeah, so let's take a look at the decks. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up, guys, if you have not done so. Appreciate all the support, of course. So yeah, this is just an example of a Gorjang deck, right? This is one that I'm more to climb to the top of the Orc leaderboard with. It's just, at this stage, it's like, I don't know, I feel like I'm just saying it's standard stuff. I think I kind of tweaked this a little bit. I put a shooter boy in just for giggles, just to be able to kind of dial up the aggro if you want to. It's not exactly as Morta had it. I twiddled with it a little bit, but the main shell is the same stuff. Really powerful flankers, hard removal, the Will of Orkz, and the no mucking about. Heal, and then obviously Gordrang himself, and just a load of how do you enhance that? Proper killies, pyromaniacs, bomb squigs to deal with AoE, and of course Makari and Warbikers. It's super powerful. Super, super, super powerful. Alright, so next up we've got Swarmlord. So this is a Swarmlord deck which is super powerful. I know Black Silence got a really high score with it last season, and also what else? I kind of want to just make sure that give shout outs on because yeah. Anyway, I can't find it, but basically you'll see when we get into oh no. Sorry guys, that's what happens when I try and do things when I'm live recording. Just a mess. So I apologise, but there's a few guys on Black Silence's team who find the screen. Yeah, who have played this to like really high ladder. It's a super good deck. It's at essence, it's another Swarmlord deck that has loads of the ground. It has a nice mix. So it's got like the Carnifexes in, but it's also got still got the Von Ryans. This card's really now. You can play this on 6 with the disruption pool, and you can play 2 of them. It's so good. Late game, 2 of them, 10 damager in stealth, really good. And you know, things like augmented ferocity, and of course the ever-old Ravenous Hunter. It just means that you can just end the game real quick, real powerful. He's got a couple of nice, like one hardened biology. He's got kind of stealth. Just keep the board safe. Yeah, double AoE, which is crutch at the minute. One of the best AoE cards in the game, I think now. Rapacious Hunger since the buff. So much better than do 2 damage. Yeah, guys, this is Swarmlord, and yeah, you can't really go wrong. This deck is very powerful. This is my Jane Zar deck. Again, climbed really highly with this. Just stun the Warlord every turn, basically, and play patiently. So, like for example, often if it's E3 and I've got a Scorpion and a Guardian Defender, I will play the Guardian Defender and use my abilities to stun the enemy Warlord rather than playing the Scorpion. It's things like that, like being a bit more patient, trying to make use of the stun, and yeah, this deck's full of damage, so you can go deeper into the game. You've got things like Convergence to draw more cards if it goes late, resources. It's just a really good deck, and it's quite tactical to play. It's quite fun. Okie dokie, so what else have we missed? Well, we're on to the Sisters. We're on to the Sisters. Now, the Erica deck that I climbed to 3k with was this. So you'll notice that what I did is actually dropped things like what I call the Penitence package. I did keep them at Martyrs. I couldn't quite bring myself to get rid of that. But I dropped the 2 drops, the Flagellants. And I went with a little bit more of a board building kind of approach, so putting the Preachers back in, and got a Priest in there and things like that. You do need a few earlier hits, and yeah, deck felt really good. One card I really loved was Emperor. I think that card just always felt really powerful. So yeah, I didn't run the Exorcist in this version, and climbed quite easily and comfortably to 3k. And of course, guys, there's so many broken cards, right? Like, I mean, we know about the relics, but we got things like Miraculous Feet. This card is just so good, able to just make something for a whole turn, and having 2 of them, just bonkers. And of course, the new card as well, Adelaide the Serene. Basically, almost, I call her like the 3rd relic, because she just ensures that you're gonna end up getting the faith that you need. And if you already have it and you get a late game, she's a shielded flanker with 7 damage, so she's pretty much hard. Excellent card. And last but not least, we've got Junith Male, because Junith is actually a male, not a female. that. No, I call it Judith Mail because it's named after Shrigma Mail's deck. Shrigma is the king of this deck. Like, honestly, we've played together a little bit, and he just sees player lines with this deck that I just don't see. I just don't see them. So I mean, I've managed to post like, I don't know, 3,370. So I'm already, you know, with 22 days to go, I've posted a pretty good score there, right? Like, it's pretty good. If you look at the sisters board, here we go. Yeah, I am 8th because this faction's busted and everyone's putting high scores, but I'm 8th, right, with 3,370. Shrigma's posted 4K. He's not even played them for the last 4 days. Like, it is so bonkers. It's so bonkers, this deck. I also think others might be playing his deck as well in the top. So this is how good this deck is. It's absolutely crazy, and this is the deck, guys. Now, what Junith has that Erica doesn't have is Junith doesn't rely on having to play what we might call the slightly weaker early game units. Remember, we said we had Andreas on our podcast. Not checked out our podcast, go and check that out. Me and the Ecclesiarch Forgecast. We talked to Andreas, the founder of EG, and he talked about how they deliberately want the early game to be weaker, and then you build your faith up, and then you come back strong at the end. Junith just bypasses that. She doesn't have to fill the deck with underpowered cards because she's got her ability, and her ability just puts a free 2 drop down every turn. And that means you can just stuff the deck with all the brokenness. Guys, the new Rhino, oh my god, oh my god. You all know this, you don't even need me to tell you now. You've all experienced it one way or another, with or against it. This thing can just build a board that is so ridiculous that you have some games that go to turn 5, by turn 5 or E5, the board is completely full, often with shielded units. It's just bonkers, this deck. This card is so crazy. And another card that's really helped is the introduction of this. Love the fact that this is a basic common card, right? But this thing being able to come on, such a nice mechanic, flank with prey. Really, you've got a choice. Do you want to remove something or do you want to pray? And again, having things like the Guidance of the Saints defense spell, because I am level 40 on the Forge, means that on turn 2, which is E3, you can basically go off, play the Zephyrin Superior, and pray. Maybe you already put a sister down the turn before, then you drop the Rhino the next turn and you've just got multiple praying units, and it's just game over. Even if they remove it, you might use things like Rite of Restoration to bring the Rhino back. It's just so good. Like, the synergy with this deck's bonkers. And then instead of the cheap crappy units, you can actually play good things like Beacon of Faith. You can play things like Conviction of Faith. These cards just on the kind of go wide board states just push them over the edge. And that's without talking about the usual suspects like Miraculous Feet. If they want to break you down, you've got things like Spirit of the Martyr, Holland Martyrs, right, to put on your Warlord. It's just got everything. You know, Exorcist for the late game AoE if it's go wide. It can struggle a little bit against big units. Like, if you get overwhelmed with big units, you can struggle because you've really only got Amalia, and we've actually dropped Adelaide, but we've dropped the 6-drop Zephyrins. We don't run in the Judgment. I'd love to get a Judgment card in here. I just can't figure out what I would drop for a Judgment card. I just can't figure it out. But other than that, I think this deck is it's just so good. It's just so good. It's the best deck in the game, quite frankly, and it needs nerfing. It's busted. It's not just strong, it is busted. I am being very clear about that. So, yeah, anyway, that is my, oh, that's not it. That is what I think is this current meta snapshot. Let me know in the comments what you think. Are there any that you can disagree with the order in here, or any that you feel I have missed? But as far as I can make out, you know, like from looking at the meta stats, looking at speaking to top players across the meta, looking at decks that are working well, you know, at Legend. I mean, it might be slightly different, obviously, if you're lower ranks, but at the looking at like what are the best decks in the game, like a Legend rank perspective, this is a pretty good representation, I think, right now, of the meta. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, guys. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys